We have so many options to choose from, but Branded Chimera is one of the best mid-range decks this format. What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Cards and Coffee, where today we're going to be going over my Branded Chimera deck list, but now with some added techs and some new combos. This deck is really suited to be in a great position in this format. We're going to go through the deck list, and of course, at the end, we'll do some test hands as well. But before we do all that, make sure you grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Alright, so this format is really diverse and you don't know what you're going to run into, but that's the beauty of this deck. You could really tech it out in any way you need. But without wasting any more time, for the Chimera stuff, it's all the same. We're still playing 3 Codal, 3 of the Sword Knight, 3 of the Mythical Claws, and we're still playing 3 Baphomet alongside 3 of the Chimera Fusion. There's really not much to explain. I think this is a very standard lineup. One thing that has been gaining popularity is the Master Tau. I've been testing it myself, and I do find that sometimes it could add to some inconsistencies, but it's a great extender for the deck, and I definitely think you should try it out yourself because it definitely opens up the options that this engine has. But like I said, very standard, nothing fancy, but we do have a heavier branded lineup this time around. Now our lineup is 1 of the Light Hex Seal alongside 2 Fallen of Albaz, and I'm also running the 1 Aliber alongside the 1 Spriggan's Kit. These cards do take up some of the room when it comes to non-engine, but it adds so much consistency and power to the deck, and that's why I love them. The Light Hex Seal is there for our Dragoon plays, which is a very great power play this deck has, but also helps insulate you against cards like Droll or any hand traps when you're trying to combo. Again, make sure you stick to the end, that way you can see some test hands and see how they play out. But of course, the spell cards that go alongside the engine is 3 of the Opening to get our Aliber, 3 of the Branded Fusion, and I'm running the 1 Branded in White to go with our Spriggan's Kit. Again, a very heavy package, but it's nice having the openings to add more consistency to the deck. Also, by playing the white, it makes it to where if you already open Branded Fusion, you have another target for Aliber. That way you're not just adding multiple Branded Fusions. And you don't have to play Spriggan's Kit, but there are times where if you open a 1-card combo, it just adds another layer to your end board. That's very appreciated in this deck. But that's 27 cards going towards our engine, which leaves us a lot of room for non-engine. I'm opting to mix it up with a variety of hand traps and board breakers. For our hand traps, I'm just playing 3 Imperm, 3 Valor, and 3 Ash Blossom. I've also considered cards like Droll and Lockbird and Nibiru, but both of them are very hit and miss in this very diverse meta. Droll is very powerful, but there are some awkward times where you haven't hit your opponent with Guardian Chimera, so if you Droll them, then now you no longer have that option, so that's something you have to keep in mind. And like I said, we have some board breakers, or at least some going second cards alongside them. I'm running the 3 Fenrir alongside 3 copies of Super Polymerization. But that's it for the main 42 cards, nothing too fancy. Let's talk about the extra deck. We've had to make some room for some cards, but it's fairly standard. We have 2 Guardian Chimera alongside 2 Chimera the King of the Phantom Beast. We have the 1 Illusion Beast, and of course the new Baphomet. Again, very standard, but for our Albaz stuff, we have the 1 Mirror Jade, of course, alongside the Rinbrum for when Branded Fusions are only play to start. Of course, we have the Lubellion alongside the Albion, and then like I mentioned, we have the Dragoons as well, not only making for a killer end board, but protecting us against hand traps as well. Plus, it adds to OTKs and breaking boards, so I definitely think this card is perfect in this deck. But then after that, the Super Poly targets, we have the Predaplant Dragostapelia, the Garura, the Mud Dragon, and then I'm opting to run the Guilty Gearfried. Technically, Dragostapelia is something you make with Chimera Fusion actually pretty frequently, so it kind of doubles in that regard. And while you don't need to run the Guilty Gearfried, I just feel like there are so many decks going Baron and SP, and I just think having this in the extra deck is very important. You could also run the Draco Knight if you're afraid of something like Monadium, but space is actually really tight now with the Dragoons, and in case you haven't noticed, I cut the Magnum Reliever. The card's really great and all, but again, space is tight, and while it's a great option to go into, more times than not, I'll just make the Dragostapelia. So that's it for the deck list, but before we hop into the test hands, if you're looking to help support the channel, please go check out all the links down below. I have a bunch of amazing partners helping me out on the channel. Down below, there's discount codes you can use as well, so make sure you save yourself some money. Plus, any purchase you do make comes back to the channel, and it helps me make content for you. Alright, so now we're going to run some test hands. Hopefully we can show some of the basic stuff this deck can do. Not only the Dragoon stuff, but of course the basic combos as well. Our starting hand is Branded Fusion, Chimera Fusion, Super Poly Ash, and a second Branded Fusion. I guess this is a good place to start in case you guys haven't seen some of the basic combos that this deck can do. We're going to start off with Branded Fusion. Of course, we're going to dump the Albaz, and then in this case, we're going to go ahead and dump the Mythical Claws. Rinbrum hits the field, and then of course the Gazelle will activate. Now we can go ahead and add ourselves an illusion. If you're worried about Droll and Lockbird, you don't add the Codal, you'll just go straight into the Sword Knight, but again, either way, you're going to get hit with Droll. In this case, we're going to go ahead and add the Sword Knight, with which we can now normal summon it and then use its effect to tribute itself off. Baphomet now hits the field, and then we can use its effect, adding ourselves a Chimera Fusion. And since we've already gone through our Gazelle, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add the Spriggan's Kit, not only to add another interruption, but to get the max value out of this combo. Now, since we control a fusion that mentions Albaz, we can special it to the field and go ahead and add us that Branded in White. This will get added to hand, and now we can go ahead and use the Chimera Fusion. We have a Fiend and a Beast, so those will get fused off. Chimera hits the field, and now we can use its effect to rip a card out of the hand, and our Baphomet can now go ahead and bring back the Sword Knight. Next, of course, we can use the effect Engrave to add the fusion back to our hand, and now we can activate that Branded in White. We can go ahead and banish the Fallen of Albaz, and then of course Baphomet as well. This of course lets us go into Lubellion, and now we can use its effect. We can discard a card, we can put it back in the extra deck alongside the Fallen of Albaz. Now we get ourselves a Mirror Jade. We can set ourselves the Chimera Fusion, the Super Poly, whatever you need. They get a card ripped out of their hand. You have the Rinbrum Interruption and the Mirror Jade as well. Plus the Sword Knight will tribute itself off during their turn. Baphomet then can add you follow-up, not only another Chimera Fusion, but now of course you can grab Claws as well. This really helps fuel your hand with monsters, so whenever you're ready you can activate a Chimera Fusion and of course go straight into a Guardian Chimera. Alright, so test hand number 2, we'll give it a good shuffle and of course give it a good cut, and our starting 5 here is going to be Baphomet, Branded Fusion, Super Poly, Mirror Sword Knight, and Cash Tier Fenrir. This is a pretty cool hand. This gets to show off the Dragoon line, so of course to start things off, we're going to go ahead and special summon Fenrir, and to play around Droll, we'll just wait to activate the effect. Next, we'll fire off Branded Fusion. If they Ash, we have the Sword Knight, so we're good to go. But now in this case, we can dump that Light Hex Seal alongside the Fallen of Albaz. Now we can summon our Albion and use the effect, banish these two, of course, to make our Dragoons. Dragoons will hit the field, and now we are clear to go ahead and normal summon that Sword Knight. Another option in this case was you could tribute summon for Baphomet to get this in the grave, so that's pretty funny as well. If you didn't start with the Sword Knight, that is another option. Another cool thing is this will be in the grave, so you'll get that search as well. But we're going to go ahead and tribute this off, do the standard combo. We bring out Baphomet, we add a Chimera Fusion and a Beast. Now we can go ahead and use that Fenrir that we've been waiting for. We'll add that to hand as well. We'll fire off Chimera Fusion, we'll fuse with the Baphomet and the Beast. The King has arrived. We'll rip a card out of their hand, and of course Baphomet can special the Sword Knight as well. Another cool thing is our Gazelle will go ahead and give us a search. We can add that Codal to hand, and then of course now we can use the Chimera Fusion to add itself back, and then we can get this Codal in the grave and go and grab some follow-up. And there you have it. Not only was Dragoon there to protect against something like Ash, or at least bait the Ash before you use the Sword Knight, but it protects against Droll or Imperm or anything of that nature by discarding any of the other cards we had in hand. You rip a card out of their hand, you have the Omni Negate with Dragoons, you have Fenrir to banish, plus on their turn you're going to tribute this off. Again, you'll get a Baphomet, you'll get another Chimera Fusion, you can add a Beast, so in this case you can add Spriggan's Kit, and then of course after all that you can activate Chimera Fusion, you can tribute some of these guys off alongside one in your hand, you'll Chimera them away, you'll get to draw some cards, bob some cards, you have follow-up for days. This deck is so crazy at what it can do. Let's go ahead and run another test hand. Alright, so this is going to probably be our last test hand. We'll give it a good shuffle, and of course, we're going to give it a good cut. And our starting 5 here is going to be Branded Opening, Fallen of Albaz, Chimera Fusion, and Gazelle, the King of Mythical Beasts, alongside Branded Fusion. This hand's actually pretty neat. We have Branded Fusion for our starter, but if everything goes uninterrupted, we actually have some really cool lines. So we'll go ahead and start Branded Opening in the draw phase. We'll get rid of Albaz and grab Albur. Like I mentioned in the profile, we already have Branded Fusion, so it's kind of nice because, well, now we can grab Branded in White. Now we can go ahead and activate Branded Fusion, and since we have combo over here already, we can go Dragoons now. Whether this was Codal or Sword Knight, that works, but the fact that we have Gazelle and Chimera Fusion, it actually works as well. So again, like last time, we'll dump the Hex Seal and the Albaz. We'll go straight into the Albion, and then of course we're going to go ahead and banish these two and go straight into our Dragoon. Now we can go ahead and normal summon our starter, or in this case our 2-card combo. We can go Gazelle to search, but instead of grabbing the Chimera Fusion, now we can add a level 5 Fiend from our deck to our hand. This of course adds the Baphomet, and while this isn't the most optimal way to do this, now we can go ahead and fire off the Chimera Fusion. These two will hit the grave, and of course we'll go ahead and go into our king. We don't have an illusion to bring back in our grave, which is a little bit of a bummer, but now we can rip a card out of the hand and get a search as well. In this case, I'm going to add Codal, which I'll then discard to go ahead and search ourselves the Sword Knight. Next, we can use the Chimera Fusion in the grave. We can add it back to hand. But then now, since we have an Albaz in the grave that we pitched off of our opening, we can activate Branded in White. We have another Dark Engrave, so you can go into Lobelion and pitch a card and go into Mirror Jade that way. But the only problem is it doesn't leave you with a card for the Dragoon discard. So in this case, I think I'll go ahead and banish the Albaz from grave, but I'm also going to banish this Albion on the field. Really quick, Editor Justin here. Albion actually doesn't need to get banished here. It gets sent to the grave. I don't know what I was thinking during this combo, but this will also let us trigger the effect in the end phase, which is really awesome. So don't make that mistake like I just did. Let's keep going. We'll go ahead and throw down that Mirror Jade. We can go ahead and set the Chimera Fusion. We didn't get to discard this with Lobelion for the added protection, but it is follow-up for the next turn. Again, there was probably a couple of different ways you could have sequenced this, but this is just, again, just to show how cool this deck is when playing it, and again, all the options you have in this awesome mid-range deck. So that's going to wrap things up for today's video. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support, and we are so close to 10K subscribers, so if you made it this far, make sure you subscribe. But with that being said, here's hoping to see you on the next one. Peace.